Good afternoon. I'm Aaron Greenwald. This is Learn Once, Write Anywhere, Introduction to React Native. And what we're going to try to do here is introduce you in a gentle way to what React Native is, what it does, where it fits in the larger ecosystem of technology today. You've probably heard a lot of hype about React Native. We know by now, you probably know if you didn't already before today, that we're doing a lot with React Native here. We're getting big on mobile and we're starting Wix 1. We're going to be launching Wix 1 soon. So if you're a front-end developer, you might be interested in getting involved. If you're a back-end developer and you're not interested in moving to the front, which I think you might want to, you probably still have questions about where this fits in the larger framework of all the technologies we use at Wix. I don't expect much in terms of your background, just that you're some kind of developer. If you know React, then you might have a bigger appreciation of what we're doing here. If you don't, you'll still get something from this talk. So what's React Native? React Native is defined by Facebook, that's from their GitHub repository, as a framework for building native apps with React. What's interesting here for those people who know React is that the React community loves talking about how they're not a framework, they're a library. React is a library for rendering views on the web. And what React Native is a way to use React to build actual native applications using JavaScript, and it gives you an entire end-to-end environment ecosystem development. Where is it up to? It's very popular, but it's also very young and unstable. The iOS version came out about a year ago. Android landed about 6 months ago. And in the last 5 to 6 months I've been working on it, I've seen about 7 or 8 versions, and a lot of those are breaking changes. So there's a lot happening. It's young, it's brand new, it's exciting, but it's also unstable, and you pay for that. It is being used in production. Facebook advertises that they're using it in their ads manager and in Facebook groups, so we know it works. The question that we have to answer, and we're going to try to address in the next few minutes, is how well does it work? If you're anything like me, this is the first thing you think. This is not new. We've been spent years as an industry trying to figure out how we can deliver native applications or some kind of mobile application using JavaScript or some other cross-platform hybrid technology. And when I first heard about React Native, I said to myself, really? I'm going to spend another, I don't know how long, learning another framework that isn't going to work? This list over here is not an exhaustive list. I just Googled for cross-platform hybrid solutions. I came up with a bunch of things. And if you look at them, you'll see a lot of technologies, some of which were better than others. A whole bunch of them are largely considered by the industry to be substandard. Part of the reason for that is that they don't deliver the kind of environments that we expect from our application, the kind of applications we expect and our users expect. And so the question that you're asking yourself now, or hopefully you're asking, is why is React Native different? How is it different? How does it offer a compelling argument away from traditional iOS, Android development? There are essentially 2 main differences that I'll highlight here. Number one is web views versus the native UI concept. Many, not all of the prior solutions, use web views. What's a web view? A web view is basically a browser running inside the shell of a native application. So your user goes to the App Store, they download an app, they feel like they have an app, they technically do have a native application, but it's actually a website. It's running essentially a browser without all the trappings of a browser. Why is this limited? Because users nowadays expect a level of user experience, a level of interaction with their applications that far exceeds what you can deliver on the web. For example, animations. Avishai just mentioned that the little touches, like does a thing bounce? Does it respond to your finger's touch naturally? Does it offer the performance of, say, 60 frames per second that they expect to feel like when they touch it, it responds as if it's one with their finger? I feel like that's very zen, but that's the idea. That's what we're trying to deliver on native applications. And websites can't really do that. JavaScript can't really do that. Websites get slow, they freeze, they don't really animate properly. They also don't always have access to native APIs. One of the big problems with a lot of the prior frameworks is that they have a tendency to get you 80% of the way there for free and make the last 20% impossible. And you start with a framework, you say, this is great, I'm going to use PhoneGap. You develop for a few months, you have an application really fast, and you're very proud of the fact that you can run it on any platform, anywhere, including Windows Phone, and then somebody asks you for a feature that you just can't deliver. And that's not acceptable. We don't want to do that. We're tired of building things that way. React Native doesn't do that. React Native gives you a fully native UI, a truly native application. When your user interacts with your React Native application, they're interacting with a native application. The second big difference has to do with this idea. A long time ago, Java came out, and they promised this dream of write once, run anywhere. And the joke with Java was that it turned into write once, run nowhere, because it just didn't work. And if you use PC, you're probably perpetually annoyed at Java for always wanting to update. It doesn't work. It's not a good solution. What the React Native developers decided was to lower their ambitions, to learn once, write anywhere. We, as an industry, have decided that at least in 2016, we're not ready to deliver a single technology that can run on both iOS and Android. Trying to do so means that we're going to have to sacrifice something or just plain fail. We don't want to sacrifice anything because our users want real good applications. We're not willing to do that, to sacrifice, not to give good applications. So we know that we need to somehow give up something, and what we give up is the ability to write a single application that we can run both on iOS, Android, and Windows Phone, or whatever else. Instead, what React Native tries to do is give you a learn once, write anywhere environment. This means that you learn one technology stack, you get your head in a certain mindset, a certain space, and you stay there. Maybe in the morning you fix a bug on iOS, in the afternoon you write a feature for Android. There's still two applications, but they're not using two entirely different technologies. You don't need two sets of developers. You don't have two different timelines on your delivery cycle necessarily. So you get to a place where you can develop applications more quickly and deliver applications more efficiently than if you were using old style native applications without sacrificing by chasing a dream that's unachievable. This is a very important point, and I titled the talk Learn Once, Write Anywhere, because I think that this change in mindset is what allows React Native to finally give us, or have the potential to give us, the solution we're really looking for. I don't think that any other solution got where React Native will get, in large part because they tried to do too much, and React Native doesn't. At this point, you should be asking yourself, how does it work? How do they do this? How can this be possible? How can you deliver, using JavaScript, a native UI? It's not very important to understand at the start the complexities of how they do this magic. You should have a high-level understanding of what they're doing and why it works. And as you develop in React Native, if you choose to do so, you'll learn more about the engine underneath. The basic concept is that you have two threads that are distinct. One a UI thread that runs natively, and one a JavaScript thread that runs in either in iOS, it runs in WebKit that ships with iOS, and in Android, in a JavaScript engine similar to, say, V8 or Node or any other JavaScript engine that ships with your application. So all of your code, all of your JavaScript code anyway, is run inside this JavaScript engine, and everything the user interacts with is run on the UI thread. They never block each other, unlike critically in web views. And they never interact with each other directly. How do they interact with each other? Over the bridge. The bridge allows them to use asynchronous serializable and batch communication. What does this mean? This means that every single time the user interacts with their UI, they scroll on a scroll view. What they're scrolling with is a native application. So they scroll through a native application, and the native application takes these events that it has to fire, batches them up, serializes them to JSON, sends them across this bridge to the JavaScript thread. The JavaScript thread catches them and fires events that you can then handle in your code. You do whatever you need to do in JavaScript, not blocking the UI. You decide what has to happen. React also does its work and decides that it needs to update the view, and then again serializes all this batch of events, sends them asynchronously over the bridge, and the UI updates. This is a big deal because it very, very efficiently and quickly allows the UI to respond at native speed, because it is native, not mocking native speed. It's a native UI, and it responds natively, and allows your business logic to run in JavaScript on a separate thread without blocking the UI. The more important question, I think, for us as developers who are first starting to do React Native is not how does it work? It's how does it feel? What does it feel like to work with React Native? I appreciate this. I appreciate that we don't have to use Xcode. You could use Xcode if you so choose to, and many iOS developers like Xcode, but maybe you have a favorite IDE already. And why do I have to use Apple's environment or the Android Studio or any environment? Why can't I just write JavaScript? If you're a web developer and you want to do native code, you should be able to stay in your own environment, and in React Native you can. How does it work? Essentially with 4 steps. You have your IDE, whatever you like. I use WebStorm. You can use what you want. Your code, which is just JavaScript, is written and then compiled via the packager. The packager runs all the time on port 8081 because it's hard-coded. And there's no open PR for that, but we'll see. It runs on port 8081. It compiles your code. It's kind of like Webpack, but not Webpack because Facebook decided that Webpack wasn't fast enough. It compiles your code every single time you make a change and serves it in either a minified or unminified, depending on your settings, file that can be used in your application. This file is called the bundle file and contains all of the logic that is required for your application to run, do whatever it needs to do. It doesn't include the binary native code that's shipped with your application. So when you deliver your application to a user, you deliver binaries and you deliver a bundle file. But while you're developing, this file is calculated on the fly live via the packager and then sent to the simulator, which is running on your computer, usually. What's Chrome doing there? Well, remember we talked about the JavaScript engine that runs in the phone? The simulator also comes with a JavaScript engine. And so when you run the application in the simulator, it looks at the bundle file and runs your code, runs your JavaScript inside the simulator. But React Native ships with a really cool feature that allows you to what they call debug in Chrome. And what happens is it swaps out the JavaScript engine inside the simulator or in your phone and replaces it with Chrome's JavaScript engine. So your bundle file and all your code is actually running inside Chrome. This is incredible because it allows you to use the Chrome console, the Chrome debugger. It allows you to open Chrome, look in the console, and feel like you're running code inside Chrome. You actually are. And then the simulator just reading across the bridge, it's basically a WebSocket. Not basically, it is a WebSocket. And across the bridge communicates across this WebSocket to Chrome and then back to the UI. To give you a better feel for how this looks or how this feels, because I think that's the most important takeaway from this talk, we're going to watch a little video because I don't have the courage to live code. Now, as you watch this video, I want you to think about, especially those of you who are native developers, how does this compare to web development? How does this compare to native development? And would you rather do this or native development? So here on the screen, what you see is the simulator in the right corner showing the application that we're developing. That's an earlier version of the Wix One app with Wix Engage inside, CRM. And you see behind it WebStorm. And I'll show you as we go in the packager as well, which is running in the command line. So what happened here was my designer comes to me and says, you know, I don't like the background color of this application. Can you please change it? So the first thing I do is I hit Command D inside the simulator, and I see, OK, I have Chrome debugging on, and I have live reload on, which will force the application to reload every single time I click Save in my editor and reload the new compiled bundle file on the fly. So I click Cancel. I go back to my editor, and I find the style sheet where this view is defined. I'll zoom in for you. And you can see that, OK, right there, I don't have a space. I'll put background color of a bunch of A's in because that's the color that I think is nice. I click Save, and I get an error. And the reason I get an error is because I missed an A. There's 5 A's, not 6. That's a common mistake, and CSS probably wouldn't tell you anything, but this is actually a pretty well-written error message that tells you exactly what you did wrong. It tells you what the valid inputs are, so you say, OK, no big deal, I fix it. So I fix it and reload automatically. I didn't have to do anything. I just click Save, and I see the new background color. Of course, that's horribly ugly, and the designer thinks I'm crazy, so I change it again, click Save, and beautiful. I think it's beautiful. But then she yells at me and says that's ugly, so I say, OK, you send me the color, and we'll do it that way. Meantime, while she goes off and gets the color, I decide I'll work on some other bug, so I switch over to Chrome, and I open the console. And you can see that there's a whole bunch of logs there because we have in debug a bunch of logging code. And everything that happens in the application as I was working was getting logged to the console because it's actually running inside Chrome. And as I interact with the application, if I click on something, I can do things in the simulator while I'm developing. I can see that the console keeps getting written to. So I can put breakpoints. I don't show here, but I can put breakpoints. I can test. I can develop on the fly. Now, if you're a native developer, you are probably already sold on this because it's mind-blowing. If you're a native developer, you're used to the idea that your only option is to compile every single time you make a change. And compilation is slow. So imagine trying to write code and then, oh, I need to change the color a little bit, or can we make the font size just a tiny bit bigger? OK, I need to recompile. Here, every single change you make, almost every change you make is instantly recompiled, sent to the simulator. You can test, you can develop, you can iterate much more quickly. This alone is a compelling reason to use React Native. But I do want to talk in more depth about the advantages in case you're not sold. I think that we have a problem in mobile app development. And this is a big problem. We need native mobile apps, so we hate writing them. Writing native mobile apps is expensive. It requires a separate skill set from what our core expertise is very often. We need to do iOS, Android. It's slow. You have to deal with Apple or Google, and you don't like dealing with them because they can do all kinds of things to you and have all kinds of requirements. At the same time, I think it's well established that the alternative solutions are not solutions. You have to have a native app in very many businesses, and you cannot settle for a native app that's not really a native app because you won't deliver the user experience that you need. React Native attempts to address these issues. It gives you a smoother transition from the web. You're a web developer, you're familiar with JavaScript, you like JavaScript, no problem. You can continue to use JavaScript. And you can probably move back and forth between the web and React Native, especially if you're a React developer. You can use the richest ecosystem there is. On most days when things are not unpublished for NPM, NPM is probably arguably the most expansive ecosystem there is in the world today. Allows you to use all kinds of technologies, all kinds of developer tools that don't really exist in as much polish or completeness for native applications. You can develop quickly. We just saw that. You can iterate. You can respond to requests much more quickly. And this one's big. You can deploy like you're on the web. So we talked a little bit about how you have a bundle file. And I said that the bundle file was shipped with your application. What if it wasn't? What if instead of shipping the bundle file with your application, we only shipped it, maybe we shipped it once with your application when you first installed it, but then we ship updates to the bundle file every single time you open it if there's a new version on the web. So every time you open the application, we go out to the web, we say, is there a new version? If there is, give it to me, and then run it. You're now delivering over-the-air updates, which is something that until now did not exist, as far as I know, on mobile. If you're a Wix, this is an incredible thing because you want CI, you know you like CI, you've made a lot of money doing CI, and you've grown very large doing CI. And you want to be able to deploy applications when you have fixes all the time. You want to be able to deploy aggressively because you don't want to have to slow down your cycle because you're not sure if it's ready. We deploy aggressively because we know that we can roll back 3% or so. And so with React Native, you get much closer to that dream of being able to deploy native applications as if they're web applications instantly just by sending them to a server. You have one skill set. This sells itself. I think that the ability to learn once and write to applications, not have to change your mental model every single time you want to move around and not have to have completely separate teams, allows you to share knowledge, share product, share expertise, and most importantly, think about the application in a way that allows you to deliver product features without this kind of silo gap between the iOS team and the Android team, without this different way of thinking, because they're not different ways. They're not different people. They're one team. And the last benefit that I think is key here is that you can reuse code. We didn't talk about this, but the truth is, even though it says learn once, write anywhere, and you have to write 2 applications, you can reuse code. Facebook says they reuse about 85% of their code. If you're using Redux, for example, whatever you're using for your business logic, it's pretty much the same between iOS and Android. Perhaps exactly the same. So all of that can get reused. It's just JavaScript. The only thing that you really have to have 2 of is your view layer because you probably want a different design, perhaps different features, maybe not even. So you get to reuse a lot of code, which also is a benefit that allows you to deliver better applications more quickly. If we review our big problem with native development, I think that we see that our problem has been solved. We need native apps, but we hate writing them. And what React Native promised us is the user experience of native with the developer experience of the web. This is a key point. This is React Native's other dream. We're going to learn once, write anywhere, and we're going to give you the ability to deliver a user experience of a native application without compromising anything, but give you the developer experience that you know you love from the web because web developers like moving quickly. And we've built a big industry based on this kind of life cycle that didn't really exist before the web. We now have entire ideas of TDD and CI and all kinds of things that we use to make us much more productive. We can use those in native now. That's what React Native is about, the user experience of native and the developer experience of the web. What often bothers people is, what if it limits me? This happens a lot. People say, okay, but there's got to be something they didn't implement. What if I need to do something and I can't do it? It won't limit you. Not because the Facebook team is great. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. I never met them. But by definition, React Native cannot limit you because it does not try to give you an API like some of the other solutions do. It doesn't try to give you an API for everything that exists in native. So they don't have to keep up or catch up with with changes that Apple or Google make to their platforms. By definition, doing React Native doesn't mean that you never write native code. It means that you have native code that runs on your application that then has JavaScript hooks, or callbacks, they call them, that allow you to access them from JavaScript. So we do occasionally write native code, not me, other people here, like Tal, other people write native code and then give us a way to access them from JavaScript. These are reusable components that are written natively and then used in JavaScript. I don't think that's going around React Native or not using React Native. That's what React Native is. Using native code, deploying it, and accessing it through JavaScript. I think that's a very big deal, and it's a very important point because it cannot be a limiting issue. It cannot stop you. You should not use React Native because what if you need native code? You can always write native code in React Native. There's always an escape hatch. And if you need to, you're encouraged to. Sometimes you use a third-party native code. Sometimes you write your own. That's OK. That's what React Native is about. Does it reach its goal? I think mostly, but it's still not web development. There are some problems. You can't always code push because sometimes you have to deploy binaries. You do have to learn to think about the platform as a native platform. You have to think about the user experience natively. It's not the same development in that sense. Styling is not web styling. It's not CSS. It's like CSS, but it's not CSS. And debugging is it's getting better, but still not as rich of an environment as they used to offer you. I think that the other very important point here is, I'm going to go through this quickly, sorry, is should I use it? I don't really know. I think it depends on what you're doing. But I think that if you operate at the scale that we operate at, if you deal with a Wix One app where you have multiple teams working on an application, where you have tons of web developers and you have an entire set of company in-house knowledge of expertise about how to deliver and develop web applications, then React Native is really your only option. We've made it and done very, very well for ourselves as a company, building and delivering applications with this kind of life cycle. And we don't want to give that up. We can't give that up. We can't afford to. And so for us, React Native, I think, is the only option. If you were a small developer making an application for a hobby project, I'm not sure React Native is mature enough yet. You might not be able to afford the learning curve that it presents because it is still a very young framework. So I think that it's worth mentioning that it's young, and it's worth mentioning that there's a lot of opportunity involved. And I think it's worth mentioning that here at Wix, the Wix Touch team is doing a lot of work on that. They're building open source native components that may become accepted in the industry. And if you're interested in getting involved, I'm sure they'll be very, very happy to hear from you. Even with I guess the gaps in the system, it's not something we can give up on. I think that for us, it's something that we need to use because we need the user experience of native, the developer experience of the web, and we need to be able to reuse our developers in a very fast and flexible environment. So the question is, is React Native impacted by memory use, especially in light of the fact that previous solutions had this kind of problem with running JavaScript, web views, things like that? They work on it. In other words, there's a lot of work put in the platform in terms of memory management. It is native code. Okay, so the UI is not.
But you still have
you have a JavaScript that are running business logic, but it's not rendering. Okay, I'm more than happy to discuss this anytime, any other time. Please talk to me. Bye.